We're going to be looking at Chapter 3 on input and output. And as an overview, you should be reading Chapter 3, and we're going to be talking about how do you print to the screen, which is going to be output for the most part, and then how do you read data from the keyboard using the scanner. We're going to do some more work with variables. We're going to look at conversions. And then we're going to look at a couple of things called literals and constants, and how do you declare them and why do you care. We're going to look at different ways of printing. We're going to look at something called printf, as well as print, which should have been bolded, print and println. We've talked about print and println before. Printf will be new. We've mentioned the modulo or modulus operator, and we'll talk about that again. And finally, we'll take a quick look at a problem with the scanner and then how do we avoid having it. We have seen a lot of print and println before, and you should know when to use each one. Remember that you should remember that the first one, print, does not give you a new line, where println gives you the new line return. And we will talk about how do you make sure you get the new line if you need one. And the key when you come across them is reading to see what happens. You should remember that AP on multiple choice questions will do their best to trip you up, and one of the ways to trip you up is misusing print or println. So let's look at a couple. So we have println, hello world, println, it's a beautiful day, and then we have print, hello world, println, it's a beautiful day. And if we go to the next slide, you see that the difference is the first gives you two separate lines, hello world, and it's a beautiful day, each on their own line. Whereas when I use just print, I get hello world, no new line, and then it's a beautiful day, all on the same line. Now, if you just used print with no println, it would end up looking like this. And you'd have the greater than symbol right next to it's a beautiful day. All right, more about variables. There's something called a literal and a constant. And a literal is the value of the variable. Isn't that useful? It is in that it gives us a vocabulary to talk about all of this. And the point that the book makes is if you have some value that you're going to stick in and you're going to use it repeatedly, maybe there's a better way of doing this. Here 5 is the literal, here hello is the literal. And what the book is going to suggest is maybe we can pass that value in some way other than hard coding it like this. Now, there are going to be times that you want to have a hard-coded number, and that's when you have a constant. And just like in math, a constant is something that doesn't change. And the big deal is, how do we know which one is which? How do you know when something is a constant as opposed to simply a variable? Because they all, to a certain extent, look alike. Well, if you have this thing called final in your declaration, and as a help, although it is not required, it is good coding practice to have the variable printed out in capital letters, and as opposed to camel casing, you put the underscores in between. So you've got the word final, and you have the underscores and the capital letters, and that's going to tell you it's a constant. The word final in the variable declaration means at this point that number can never change in the rest of the program. So that is the whole deal. If we go back, and here I have int x equals 5. At any time I want to, I can change the value of x. I can make it anything I want. But when I have final double or final int, whatever, then I cannot change that later on. And that just makes life easy when you're going to use this many, many, many times. All right, new topic. I want to format the output or what is printed to the screen. And let's look at why that might be true. If I declare a double, price per dozen of eggs is $3.50, and price per item is going to be price per dozen divided by 12, and if I print the price of one item is, what's going to be printed out? Well, obviously it's going to be 350 divided by 12, but unless I do the math, I have no idea. Well, it turns out it's going to be 0.2916666, repeating until we get to the 7 at the end. Well, that's not a particularly satisfying answer. Also notice that I have my caret at the end. We're going to, again, deal with that shortly. All right. What can we do about that? Well, that's where printf comes in. This is a formatted print statement. And what I've done is I've said there we're going to print out the price per one, and now I'm going to use printf. And there it is. So as opposed to having however many decimal places there are, I think it's something like 16, we're only going to have, 6 of them. Well, where 6 is better than 16, if I'm dealing in dollars and cents, I really probably want to have just 2 decimal places. So let's see what we can do. There's something called %d. Well, let's look back a second. Notice I have %f. Well, that's for a float, and a float is a number with a decimal place. Well, if I want to do integers, I'm going to use d. D is for decimal, decimal base 10. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but sort of. If you're going to print a floating point, which is a double, then we're going to use %f. You know, you really ought to try this a couple of times just for fun. And you'll get required to, so do it so you can figure this out. Now, how can I control the number of decimal places? If I put the percent sign 0.2, that says I'm going to get 2 decimal places. So the period or decimal point and 2, whatever this number is, that's going to tell me how many decimal places I will end up printing out. If I want to do something with my integers, I can say %08d, and this will print out the number, and it'll have 8 places, and it will have leading zeros if need be. In other words, if I print out a 1-digit number and use %08, I'm going to have 8 zeros before the single digit, or 7 before the single digit. You ought to try it without the 0 and see what the difference is. Oh, by the way, yeah, that could show up on a quiz. All right, so let's go back and look at printf for a moment. We've got our same problem, and we're printing it out 3 different ways. Println, printf was simply %f, printf with 0.2f, and you can see that, oh, look at that, those two came out on the same line. We're finally going to deal with this. All right, but the deal here is, here I've got 6 decimal places for the printf, and when I do 0.2f, I get just the 0.29. So I never get a new line. And so this is called an escape character, and we're going to see others of its kind. The //n is what we're going to use to get a new line. So let's see if we can do this correctly. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the price of 1 is %f/n. We're going to end our quote, we're going to have a comma, and this is what we're printing out. Okay. So the new line, or yeah, the new line character /n /n gets us to a new line each time. So the correct way to set this up is system.out.printf, quote, any text you want to put in, your %f or d, whichever, /n, end quote, comma, and the name of the variable you're going to be printing out. And so that's how you can print out the number of decimal places you want and not have to have them all. If you want all 16, then use println. If you want some other number, then use printf and tell the computer how many decimal places to put in. All right. Remember that all of this is actually in lowercase. All right. Does it matter which one you use? Well, yes and no. Yes, you need to know when to use print and println. AP does not use printf, but it makes your output look good, and we will use it in class. We will look at more of this later, but now you should be aware of it. See page 40 of the text for more information. Alrighty. All right, as a gentle aside, if you go to HTTP, etc., you're going to get to the Java API, which is going to tell you all of the methods and all of the classes that you can deal with Java. So if you are trying to do something and you're not really sure how to do it, there are 2 options. One is Google. I would highly recommend it. It's one of my favorites. And if you want to know more about the actual Java environment and the Java programming, then go here. 8 says that is Java 8, which is the latest Java, Standard Edition 8. And it is actually very informative reading. It is not the most exciting reading in the world, but it is very, very informative. I would recommend that you at least become familiar with what's there, and we'll refer to it more as we go along. All right, homework, page 42. It says copy the code to your IDE, but remember that if you were smart, you went to GitHub, etc., and downloaded a zip file that had all of the code for all of the examples. So if you do that, you will have the code already available. And for your advantage, it's partly commented. But I want you to fully comment each line of the code, not just the comments they have, but I want each line. What does each line do? What's its purpose? In the conversion and output section, what is the result of each line of the code? And what I'd like you to do when you're finished with this is place it in a folder that will have the other homework in it. This is going to have a name so it can compile appropriately. And if you add your name to that, then it's going to make life exciting. But if you simply put everything into a folder and the folder has your name on it, chapter 3 underscore your name, and then zip it, you can hand that in. Okay. All right, you should read and then demonstrate the bug, the scanner bug, by writing code other than that which is in the book to demonstrate what the bug is and how to fix the bug. Okay, so you need to read about that in the textbook. All right, and then on pages 46 and 47, do problems 3.1 through 3.4. Each problem should have a separate Java file. All of the code files should be put into that zip folder. And it says name it chapter 3 underscore your name. Remember to zip it. And then hand that in on Canvas. All right, that is a rapid overview of Chapter 3. We will work on Chapter 3 or problems related to work in Chapter 3 in class.